Hi, everyone, and welcome to Meet Yourself, Navigating Midlife Metabolism. And I'm here again this week with Dr. Laurell, and we're going to be talking about thyroid. We've gotten a lot of questions, and we're combining them now, and we're going to present as many of the answers to these questions as possible. So today we're going to really be talking about thyroid and mood, how our thyroid affects our mood, and how our mood can affect our thyroid. And we'll talk about I can give you a little bit about the science behind it because I get very excited about that. But we'll also give you practical tools on what you can do to regulate and balance your thyroid. And let's get started. So, hello, Dr. Laurell. How are you today?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing fine, a little bit tired today. Uh, I hope it's not my thyroid, but a little bit tired. Had quite a busy day yesterday recording podcasts, and I did a podcast that our viewers will be able to see on thyroid health, summarizing some of the things that we've been talking about. So, what are your ideas? I've done some research on the background, the biochemistry, because I love biochemistry, physiology. How does our thyroid really get affected? Or how does thyroid mood really interact? And I came up with some concepts, and one of them was very interesting, and I'd love your opinion on that. How thyroid function, we have our T4, T3, how it's involved in the synthesis of neurotransmitters that make our serotonin and our norepinephrine and our dopamine, and in essence, neurotransmitters that help us feel good. Do you have any clinical insights for us on really
Mhm.
what's happening here?
Oh yeah, you really nailed it. You have to think about whenever the thyroid isn't functioning properly and we don't have a sufficient amount of thyroid hormone, that every cell in our body is going to be struggling to function properly, which means cells in the brain are going to be struggling to make the balanced amounts of neurotransmitters that you need to have a positive mood. And so that is a hugely important layer. And then thyroid can dysfunction can affect our ability to sleep, and our mood's going to spiral even more when that happens.
What was so interesting, if we really, you don't need the biochemistry training to do this, but when you really think about it, thyroid, as we've been talking about, is really necessary, having those hormones for energy. And we need energy to produce our metabolic constituents, our neurotransmitters, even the enzymes that do the conversions. And I just find that so fascinating. And yet, we don't really talk about that when people have mood issues, let's say depression. Yes, people are given medication for that. But how do you find this in your clinical practice? Do people really go and look at the thyroid function? I read a statistic, I don't know if it's true or not, that almost 60% of the people go undiagnosed with thyroid.
Yeah, that's a huge issue, and I'm kind of always keeping thyroid in the back of my mind when I'm working with patients. Many of them are coming to me already with a thyroid diagnosis, but others are undiagnosed or underdiagnosed. So, whether we're talking about cardiovascular issues or something like this, someone dealing with mood issues, I absolutely keep this in the back of my mind because it has such a profound impact on our body and how we feel and our sense of vitality whenever our thyroid is messed up. Plus, our thyroid being out of balance can contribute to the total amount of inflammation in our body. And then that inflammation is also implicated when it comes to mood.
Sure, inflammation on the brain. There's so much research now on that.
Mm.
Again, it's a multifaceted approach. Again, I mean, condition, or I don't even want to use the word condition. it's just not one thing. It affects everything. And that's what we've concluded over the last several weeks that we've been working together and talking about all of this. And in our new group that we're doing, the women that bring this up, we're always coming back to the whole body concept. So let's turn now. I like to always combine the insights, the scientific insights, or even the personal insights with what are some practical approaches. And we're looking again in a multifaceted approach here. And the first one I like to even talk about is our diet. What happens with our diet, the selenium and iodine that we could take as supplements, of course, but also in the selenium and iodine rich foods, like the Brazil nuts, the seafood, the eggs. I had mentioned something on my podcast where I don't use iodized salt, and that's where
Mhm.
we're getting fortified with iodine. What does that mean? That means that I have to be aware of where I'm getting my iodine. So a good multiple works for that. Or, you know, I was talking about diet with the foods that actually deactivate our thyroid function, and how if we cook them, for example, soy, if we cook the soy, or we cook the cruciferous vegetables like the cabbages, the cauliflower, the broccoli, or Brussels sprouts, if we cook them, we actually deactivate the compound that utilizes the iodine that's made for thyroid hormone, right? So that's why if I make miso soup, for example, I'll use seaweed in with the miso and the soy, because that seaweed gives the iodine that's necessary for the conversion of what's ever needed in the thyroid,
Mhm.
the T4, the two, or the T3 to the T4, et cetera. So I'd like to know, maybe you can offer some insight on this, on what we're really talking about in as far as diet, nutrition, maintaining that.
Mhm. Right,
The
right.
goitrogens, they're actually called.
Mhm.
These the goiter is something that happens with the thyroid where we have underactive thyroid gland, or we could also talk about overactive thyroid gland, but I think most of our audience were really referring to the hypothyroidism that occurs.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely much more more common. And it's because I thought our thyroids are being impacted on so many levels, which is why we encourage people to eat a clean diet with as many organic ingredients as possible, because
Right.
not only are we missing some of the good things, but our diet brings in some troublesome chemicals sometimes, and so we're wanting a healthy, balanced approach. And another thing that I wanted to bring up is the stress impact. There's kind of an interplay between thyroid issues and stress. And that's both that when our thyroid is not functioning properly, it's going to impact our adrenals, which make cortisol the stress hormone. And there's this really big interconnection there. It's both about the fact that these two together are trying to work to maintain our metabolism, as well as the fact that when we have that inflammation that I mentioned, that's impacting how our brain is communicating with the adrenals through what's known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And so all of these systems are so interrelated, and to tie that back into diet briefly, I am always encouraging my patients to try to eat their meals on a more or less regular time frame.
Right.
Have their food kind of in these evenly spaced out meals at more or less the same time, because our body kind of gets set on a clock. And if it knows when to expect nutrients, and say end up skipping a meal, that actually ends up being more stress on the body. So
Yeah.
skipping meals and not letting the body uh, develop develop kind of these set points wherein it can expect sleep or expect food or things along those lines, ends up being more stress on the body.
We could, I was thinking stress is a goitrogen for the mind, where it actually shuts down so many systems, activates, but then shuts down, stimulates, then shuts down. We overuse it, depression or any mood issue that we have. Let's talk about mood from the respect of depression or dysthymia, even from overstimulation, because then we become understimulated because we've used our resources. So
Mhm.
stress, what is stress? Let's for people that might not have heard me speak about this before, it's really a perceived threat. And as you said, Laurell, when we're not eating on a systematic way, when we're not operating systematically, it can put our body into a stressful situation. And that's why I've always advocated for people that love this fasting, and we'll talk about that at another episode, but people that love fasting, if it's not done skillfully and systematically, it creates more stress on the system.
Mhm.
And people won't see it immediately. They'll see it maybe 6 months down the road when they start seeing their metabolism affected and other organ systems. And I've spent many, many years in research on fasting, starvation, and things of this nature. So what we want to really look at here is our stress, and our diet can produce stress, as you mentioned, the chemicals in the diet. We have so many environmental toxins now, and I don't want to be negative about this, but we must be aware. We don't
Yeah.
have to be fanatical. We just
Mhm.
need to be aware
Mhm.
that they are. Filter your water if you have chlorine. Get rid of chlorine, fluorine, and we talked about this, bromide, and what was the other one? Fluoride, chlorine, bromide. We're talking about the halogen.
Yep, those are all
Yeah,
the
the halogen
harmful
chemistry.
halogens that are competing with the good halogen
Iron, right,
iodine. So
right, right.
mhm.
And so we have to really be aware of all these things. You don't want to be spraying lawns, spraying chemicals in your house. All of those things, we might think they go down the drain, but they go into our lungs, and they also go down into the water table, the soil, and affect every single thing in the ecosystem. The other thing I'd like to mention is exercise is extremely important for maintaining a good thyroid. We know about mitochondria health, and
Mhm.
exercise helps with the proliferation of mitochondria. And in many cases, depending on, I've done some research recently, people overcoming certain illnesses may have a dysfunction in the exercise mitochondria function. So let's just talk about in a normal situation, exercise will increase mitochondria, especially thyroid in the brain, in the heart,
Mhm.
all of these things that are crucial to keeping our energy balance and our respiration going. So that's
Right.
the point I want to make. And if you'd like to say something about that, please do.
Yes, yeah. Well, I just wanted to add, and then the benefits that exercise has on mood and our
Right,
cortisol balance, because we've been talking about stress and the thyroid, but then how that's impacting our levels of cortisol. And when our cortisol shoots up or our cortisol's too low because of this combined impact of thyroid issues and stress, then that further exacerbates
right,
mood issues, either leading to anxiety and depression. So that's another reason why exercise just fits into all of these layers so perfectly. And we're just meant to be creatures that move is what it comes down to. We're not supposed to
right.
be sitting in these chairs all day.
Very important, very well said. And also, I'd like to just throw this in here. I think now more than ever, we need to go inward. We need to meet ourselves. We need to really be able to do our own survey of how we feel and really acknowledge that. I teach meditation. I just taught a class. I teach them on Wednesdays, and you can go to courses.susantaylor.org if you'd like to join the community, the meditation community. And I do a systematic practice, and that systematic practice will bring bring you back into balance. And that's also useful. You don't have to do that, but I'm just throwing that out there in addition to diet, exercise, working with stress. And everything is not created equal. We have to be very skillful, and everything must be done to really see results, everyone. You have to do things in a systematic approach. It's the systematic approach, the repetition, that creates the habit, and that habit then creates the new rewiring that we need for a healthy body and healthy mind. And I'd like to conclude with that, and we'll take more questions. And so please keep sending them in. You can reach Dr. Laurell or myself. The links are in the below in the video. And until next time, stay healthy and happy. Okay, see you soon.